7:42 now. Time to talk with the voice of the creative economy. It is Vincent Heeringa over at Idealogue magazine, idealogue.co.nz. Good morning, Vincent.
Good morning, Wammo. How are you?
Very well, thanks. First up, let's look at this investigation from the Commerce Commission into Sky. They have been investigating some of the regulations around, or non-regulations around, the telecommunications industry, but and of course also the entertainment industry in New Zealand. But now they're going to be broadening that.
Yes, it started with the announcement that Igloo, which is a joint venture between Sky and TVNZ to produce a kind of a Sky Lite. It's a cheap subscription service that carries a few TVNZ channels, on which were previously only on the free-to-air network, and a few Sky channels, and it's kind of a low-cost version of Sky. The announcement that Igloo was going to launch triggered a bunch of complaints from other media players, in particular MediaWorks, which is the owner of things like 3 and 4, and also the radio. There were a bunch of radio stations, of which this one is part of. And the complaints sort of centred on we've talked about this before, and what's happened is the Commerce Commission have ruled and has come out with a ruling, but I'll just go to the complaints that centred on this suspicion that between Sky and TVNZ there's a kind of a dominance forming around the ability to get the rights to rebroadcast content, in particular sport and movies and, high-profile popular TV shows that you have to go overseas and buy. And because Sky has got such a dominance in New Zealand, its ability to go and buy these programs overseas and rebroadcast them and then offer reasonably onerous terms to anyone else that wants to rebroadcast them is under question. And so this Igloo thing was investigated, and the Commerce Commission said, no, it looks sweet.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you outside of Igloo, there's still quite healthy competition in that space. So they didn't think that Igloo was in breach of any competition law. But that's not where it ends, because what it then said, this is the Commerce Commission said, but actually the whole market looks slightly interesting from a competition point of view, and they, under another section of their remit, they are now investigating, and you might as well call it the Sky investigation, because that's basically what it is. They're investigating to see whether Sky is so dominant as to be a monopoly in the content business. And
I wonder, how extensive this investigation is going to be, and whether or not it's going to cover all forms of content on Sky.
Well, I think it has to, but what makes it doubly complicated, Wammo, is that the technology is changing so fast. We've just had QuitFlix, which is the kind of on-demand internet-only movie service launch in New Zealand. So that's internet TV. You get Apple TV operating in New Zealand. You can watch TVNZ on demand. You could put a satellite in your backyard and receive, which you have been able to do for 20 years, receive international cable networks. Broadband, ultra-fast broadband is going to open up a whole lot of different competitors. So it's very difficult. It seems to me it's such a moving feast of a market that I think the Commerce Commission will have one hell of a job to understand or make a ruling about whether one has a monopoly over another.
Do you think that essentially the Commerce Commission are just trying to satisfy the demands from those other players to investigate, and as quite often the Commerce Commission comes back and says, no, all sweet?
There could be some politics in it. John Follett, the chief executive of Sky, says the only reason they're doing this is because people are complaining. Well, that's a little bit like saying that the only reason the police are investigating is because someone laid a complaint. It's a thing. It's called democracy, John. It's how it works. People are allowed to complain, and that's what regulatory bodies are for. But I think there's another question here, and it's the whole thing of this moving feast of the technology and the platforms. There's a second question here, which I find just puzzling, and this is me speaking as an entrepreneur, that Sky, the story of Sky really has been one of a very long-term play, a lot of money poured in by some individual investors to get to the position they are in. It's not been an easy journey for them. They have won kind of house by house, street by street to build up their network. And yes, they do have a dominant position. Whether it's dominant to the point of monopoly, I guess, is the question at hand. But that's been a well-earned position, Wammo, and they have worked, spent money and done a pretty good job of getting to the point that they are. On a
local level, yes, they've done that, but I think, don't people have the problem with the fact that they are essentially backed by Murdoch and backed by a bigger organisation behind the local version of Sky, so therefore they were never really going to fail?
Well, that's a little bit like saying that we don't want Crayford Farms running here because it's being owned by a Chinese company. I think some of that's a bit xenophobic, a little bit politically correct. And people are applying, and quite quickly this discussion reverts to anti-Murdoch and to just comparisons with the UK, where the media dynamic is completely different. We don't have one person or one organisation owning all of the newspapers, all of the radio stations, all of the TV networks.
No, we have two. Not just one, just two.
No, well, we also have independent... plenty of independent media that's locally owned, like us, for instance. I don't think that the same levels of corporate control exist, or at least if they do, as you say, there is a duopoly as opposed to a monopoly. And so I don't. I could be wrong about this, and I'm very happy to be wrong about it. And I guess it's what the Commerce Commission is investigating. But I don't think that the same dynamics, when we certainly haven't seen the level of politicalisation of the media as you have in the UK.
Okay, moving on from that quickly into the budget and your thoughts on the upcoming Bill English zero budget.
I just think it's going to be a very interesting dynamic, and this term is heating up into quite an ideological term for the government, and we have a very clear divide now between left and right, and I think it's very interesting the way it's heating up, and it's not heating up in a way that is entirely predictable, because on the one hand, yes, it is predictable. You have the teachers' unions, you have service workers' unions, low-cost housing, welfare-type organisations lining up on the left along with Labour to attack the many things that National are doing to, I suppose, address what they see are the inefficiencies in the economy. But at the same time, National are spending in the areas that Labour holds dear. They're spending up large in science and R&D, and they're spending up large in education. And so I think there's an interesting dynamic happening here, Wammo, where both parties are valuing the growth of intellectual property, the growth of research, the growth of kind of stimulating high-margin businesses, export growth. And it's making it difficult for, I suppose, anyone that thought that National was on a new right kind of agenda. I think they are not, and it's going to be interesting next few months to see just how things shake down. And this budget, I suspect, will be a real bellwether budget for National and setting an agenda for the next couple of years. Okay,
and the Marketing Awards is just around the corner.
Just a quick reminder, the Marketing Awards, celebrating all that's great about marketing, design, advertising, the stuff we love to hate and hate to love. Yeah. That's closing this week, so you get your entries in. Things are going incredibly well on that front, but it's easy to enter, hard to win.
What's the website?
everythingmarketing.co.nz.
Thanks very much, Vincent.
Thanks, Wammo.
Idealog.co.nz for more.